Hi all you lovely kings, queens, and in-betweens, my name is Elaine, and I want to welcome you to my Unison League Lancer 7th Ring Guide. I'm going to go through each shiny new non-passive ability in the Master Lancer's ring one by one and provide my thoughts on them now that I've had the chance to play around a bit. Give a little review of their capabilities and what they might be good for, if anything. And now, without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right into things with Delta Sting, which has a cooldown of 4 seconds and a cost of 9. It is a Lancer exclusive ability which targets a single enemy. Its ability power is boosted by 50 if the target is already in break, but normally has an ability power of 100. It deals physical damage 3 times with a success value of 100. It increases the target's break by 80. I like this ability, it's one I keep in my current Lancer set. I like it for a few reasons. First, it has a low cost and cooldown and decent AP considering these two things. It can grow stronger, however, if your target is broken, which is pretty rad. Finally, it hits multiple times, increasing its damage output, and the latter portion of its description, the fact that it increases the target's break by 80, serves to further compound its power. The only thing Delta Sting is lacking are penetration effects, but it's great in PvP and PvE when you need to get an attack off quickly. To me, it feels a little better for PvE since you can spam it against hordes of monsters, which will fall before your feet, since they're often pretty squishy unless you're going up against one of those purposefully difficult quests. Next up is Unshakable Tactics, which has a cooldown of 60 seconds and a cost of 20. It's another Lancer exclusive ability which applies Field Intercept. Field Intercept nullifies advantageous field effects applied to the enemy field. This lasts for 40 seconds. This one isn't my favorite for several different reasons. First, it has both a high cost and cooldown. Second, it's only useful in a very specific situation when the enemy has an advantageous field effect on their field. As a result, it isn't helpful in PvE since it isn't possible for monsters to gain these, and is only helpful in PvP after one of these effects has been applied. To my knowledge, the only way this is possible is through a monster's effects. Although Unison is a way to more or less dictate who wins a PvP battle, monsters are used so infrequently, this ability just doesn't seem worth it. Especially when you consider the fact that Unshakable Tactics only lasts for 40 seconds, which probably won't even cover the full advantageous field effect of your enemy. In other words, you'll probably have to use this ability twice in order to nullify whatever the enemy has on their side of the field, if anything. Dragon Thrash has a cooldown of 7 seconds and a cost of 14. It's a Lancer exclusive ability that's only usable when a scythe is equipped in your main weapon slot. It targets one enemy with an ability power of 150. It deals physical damage 4 times with a success value of 100. It applies Scorching for 10 seconds with a success value of 50. Scorching causes its victim to take 5% of their current HP per stack as damage every time they use an ability. It also lowers their main gear proc chance by 30%. Finally, Dragon Thrash increases your critical hit chance by 20% for 10 seconds. This move is okay. It's my least favorite of the new weapon exclusive Lancer abilities. It has a low cost and median cooldown, which is good. It has decent ability power and hits multiple times, which is also quite good. It has 100% accuracy, right on there, and then applies Scorching, with a 50% chance of failure. This means you're probably going to fail because Unison League luck defies logic. However, if it does land, it's like applying a burn state in Pokemon. Every time the enemy attacks, they lose health and their main slot gear, presumably the cream of the crop, has a decreased chance of going off. This is nice and might just provide the edge you need to get ahead. Because of the latter half of Scorching's effect, this ability is a bit better for PvP than PvE since monsters don't have gear equipped, which you can affect with Scorching. Dragon Thrash's ability to increase your critical hit chance is an added bonus, but not a very good one. It only lasts for 10 seconds, which isn't a lot of time to get anything off. But who knows? You may get lucky. Lance Flash has a cooldown of 10 seconds and a cost of 17. It's a Lancer exclusive ability that's only usable when a lance is equipped in your main weapon slot. It reduces the physical and magical damage you take by 90% for 3 seconds after this ability is used. It targets one enemy with an ability power of 180. It deals physical damage 5 times after the damage reduction effect ends. Lance Flash reduces ability cooldown times, except for certain abilities, by 25% for 15 seconds. This is my favorite of the 3 new weapon exclusive Lancer abilities and the one I use in my current Lancer set. I like it because it has a relatively low cooldown, although its cost could use a little help. I also appreciate that it applies a lesser version of Guard, in the sense that this part of Lance Flash's effect lasts for only 3 seconds as opposed to Guard's 5 seconds. Before unleashing the Lancer's signature Fury, it has a high ability power and hits its target multiple times. Then it reduces most of your ability's cooldown time so you can keep attacking your enemies. After all, as a Lancer, you naturally woke up and chose violence. Unfortunately, like Dragon Thrash, Lance Flash lacks penetrating powers, which would make it even better. Despite this, it's still a great ability for both PvP and PvE, especially if you time it right. For example, if you're raiding and you know the monster is about to use one of its tougher moves, because the game telegraphs these sorts of things, you could pop this ability right before the monster does and save yourself before dealing massive damage. This ability could also be used to replace guard in your Kalo setup or during other PvP events when you need to survive just a bit longer to help your team out. It's a solid ability and something I would not go without because it helps counteract the common squishiness of the Lancer while also allowing them to keep doing their job, which is destroy the enemy. Grand Impact has a cooldown of 10 seconds and a cost of 15. It's a Lancer exclusive ability that's only usable when an axe is equipped in your main weapon slot. It targets one enemy with an ability power of 170. It removes both damage reduction and reflection, dealing physical damage 5 times with a success value of 100. Grand Impact also applies Quiver, which makes it so the target will only be able to select themselves when using an ability that supports allies for 10 seconds time. This ability is actually really good, but it has one main problem which I will get into later. I like that it has both a lower median cost and cooldown and a higher ability power, especially when both its cost and cooldown are taken into consideration. I like that it removes both damage reduction and reflection and hits 5 times with complete accuracy. This allows you to not only deal the most damage you are able, since there's nothing to get in your way, but your teammates as well because it's a removal of these 2 hindrances as opposed to a more common penetration ability. The latter portion of the ability, which induces Quiver, isn't particularly good because it could hit someone who isn't carrying a support ability, although this is kind of unlikely, or not matter since many support abilities have an area of effect. It also only lasts for 10 seconds, which isn't a ton of time, so its hindering capacity is certainly limited. Now, onto my only problem with this ability. It requires you to place an axe in your main weapon slot if you want to use it. Now, axes aren't hard to come by, but you've presumably been playing predominantly as a Lancer up until this point, so you probably don't have a very good one around. If you do, it's probably not infused, so you're probably going to be taking a hit to your stats if you take this ability. And if you use an axe with an ability that just doesn't work for your class, maybe it has a class exclusive ability on it or something, forget about it. You're really going to be taking a hit. Now, one slot might not sound awful, and I suppose in the grand scheme of things it's not, because at least the devs threw you a bone and let you get some axe passive boosts in the Lancer's 7th ring, but it's not as large as the one you've been given to Sais and Lances, which you've probably got a horde of that are infused and shiny and awesome. At least axes have the same average stat ratio as Sais and Lances, unlike clerics, who the devs took a poop on again with their new 7th ring Lance and Scythe passive boost. But I digress. This is Lancer talk time. Basically, with this one, you must weigh the pros and cons of using it. For me, as someone with no decent axes, it's not worth it because my stat decrease is so substantial. But if you have a good axe, it'll probably benefit you to take Grand Impact over one of the other 2 weapon exclusives offered by this ring because it's such a solid ability, especially in PvP settings. Raging Break has a cooldown of 6 seconds and a cost of 18. It's a Lancer exclusive ability which targets one enemy with an ability power of 100. It deals physical damage 3 times, it penetrates damage reduction and reflection effects with a success value of 70. It increases ability cooldown times by 25% for 15 seconds. I'm a bit torn on this one. It has a nice low cooldown but high cost. It has a median ability power but hits multiple times and penetrates both damage reduction and reflection. But it's not entirely accurate. There's a 30% chance you'll miss your target, assuming you're not blinded or something, which would just make matters worse. Then it reduces ability cooldown time so you can spam more stuff. I'm just not sure this is worth it given its cost and relatively high miss rate. There are better moves you could take in its place for both PvP and PvE. Last up on our list is Master Lancer's Cry, which has a cooldown of 20 seconds and a cost of 25. This is another Lancer exclusive ability which targets one enemy and adjacent enemies, a max of 3 enemies. It reduces their Unison gauge by 8. It also decreases Unison gauge gains by 2 for 5 seconds. This is a new and improved version of a Lancer's negative pressure, which decreases the Unison gauge of one enemy and their adjacent enemies, a max of 3 enemies, by 10. I say this for a few reasons. First, Master Lancer's Cry has a lower cooldown than negative pressure, 20 instead of 40 seconds, which is something even a full enchantment of negative pressure can't beat. The lowest the cooldown can go is 30 painfully long seconds. However, negative pressure does have a slightly lower cost of 15 to Master Lancer's Cry of 25. Things start to edge in Master Lancer Cry's favor, however, when you consider the rest of the ability. Master Lancer's Cry targets one enemy and adjacent enemies, a max of 3 enemies, reduces their Unison gauge by 8, and decreases Unison gauge gains by 2 for 5 seconds, whereas negative pressure only decreases the gauge of a maximum of 3 enemies by 10. The 2-point difference is negligible. It's still going to keep your slower enemies from unioning with their mates and wiping you and your team out. So mission accomplished. Master Lancer's Cry also has the added effect of decreasing enemy Unison gauge gains by 2 for 5 seconds. Although this isn't a lot of time to get many abilities off in, it's something that could hinder the enemy just long enough for your team to get ahead and win. Unfortunately, this ability, like many others, can be countered by things such as monster effects and a treasure hunter's extended Unison, for example. So that's something to keep in mind. It's also only beneficial in PvP situations since monsters can't Unison and use other monsters against you and your teammates. Finally, although not much of an improvement over negative pressure, as previously mentioned, it is an improvement. The difference in cost is negligible, and this is something you can use more frequently than negative pressure simply because of the difference in cooldown, which means you could hinder your enemies more effectively with this ability than negative pressure, especially when you consider how it also slows Unison gains, which again, negative pressure does not have the capacity to do. And there you have it, Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens, my guide to Unison League's 7th Lancer ring, or the Master Lancer ring. What did you think of my guide, and what do you think of these new abilities? Let me know down below in the comments. I always like to know what you guys think. And if you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue, subscribe, ring that bell so you'll know what's up, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.